Hello and welcome to the Digital PR Podcast. I'm joined today by the brilliant Raquel Pinto, who I have the pleasure of working with at Propellernet on a daily basis. Not only is Raquel a wonderful PR professional in every aspect, she is also an expert in how AI is changing media outreach, which is what we're going to be discussing in detail today. Raquel, lovely to see you as always, and thank you for joining us. How are you?
Thank you so much for having me, and what an intro! I love that. I'm all good, thank you. How are you?
Very well. I'm very well. We're both recording from home today, so hopefully everything will work swimmingly because I'm very much looking forward to our discussion. So let's jump straight in. What I was eager to know, because you have been doing an awful lot of thinking about this, an awful lot of work on this, and it has been a pleasure to kind of get your thoughts and hear all of your thinking, and that's what we're going to convey to listeners today. But what first sparked your interest in kind of integrating AI into media outreach efforts? Was there kind of a turning point or like an aha moment, which sounds very Alan Partridge, but that's okay, I think. Tell us, Raquel.
I think there was definitely a aha moment, as you put it. I think about a year ago, I was looking at my weekly calendar and I just realized that I personally was using AI across loads of tasks. So like refining copy or time management or editing internal documents. But in terms of media outreach, I was doing so much of it still manually. And I hit this moment where I thought, like, why am I spending 45 minutes tracking down contact information or scanning outlets when AI could definitely help with a bit of this automation? And so I sat down and I literally just wrote down a big old list of things that were eating at my time, and most of them I realized were curation tasks. So things like finding recent articles or checking if a journalist is still at a certain publication or, stress testing a hook against the current news cycle. So much of that I realized could be either automated or at the very least accelerated. And that definitely had a sort of a flip of a switch moment for me where I was like, AI doesn't really need to be flashy. It just needs to make the boring bits quicker so I can focus on the good stuff. And I think the moment I started treating AI more like an intern who could take those like brainless admin tasks off of my plate, that's when things really changed for me.
That makes perfect sense. So I think a lot of the work you've done and conveyed to the team has helped to simplify it in those terms so that it doesn't have to be, you don't have to understand really even how it works. It's actually just what it can do and how it can and kind of help you become more efficient and manage time more effectively. And you've mentioned a couple of things there, but how do you think AI is changing the way PRs such as ourselves approach media outreach? Because there's a lot to this. There's a lot more than just efficiency and kind of better use of time. What do you think?
Definitely. I don't think it's just like helping us write faster. It is definitely helping us think better. In the past recent years, we've seen it go from this like little helpful spell check to a research assistant on steroids that never needs coffee, and I think that the biggest shift there really is the PRs aren't writing with AI, even though that sort of appears to be the predominant discourse that we see online. Most of us really are using it to think more strategically and more insightfully. It's letting us really step out of this like little PR bubble and into how do audiences actually talk, how do they think, how do they care, and using that to make the way we speak to journalists that much more relevant and optimized because we can understand what the reader and the editor and the outlet wants. And as a digital PR pro, if you're listening to this or if you like have listened and have seen discourses around AI, if you're just using AI to fix grammar or draft stuff, then it's like you're bringing a butter knife to a gunfight. You could be doing so much more. I hope the comparison works.
It does. It does. Yeah, it makes sense to me. Um, you've used the word strategically there, and I'm really keen to kind of get some deeper thinking from you on like some of the ways in which you've seen AI actually help PRs become more strategic in how they pitch stories. That really interests me. And I know we've spoken a little bit about this. We've spoken about it as a team, but your thoughts on that would be most welcome.
Uh, there's a lot that we could touch on, but I feel like the predominant thing that is most helpful is definitely helping you be very ultra specific. It's not just so many of us, at least at the beginning, we're going to ChatGPT and asking, some deadlines that work for this story. But to be able to then take it a step further and say, what are the subject lines or the hooks that are most likely to get opened by relationships journalists in the northwest of Wales for this specific publication? And to have AI be able to look at all of this massive years of data and help you have something so specific that gives you the absolute best chance at getting a cut through. And you're really being able to reverse engineer journalist preferences, really finding the content gaps, because it can look at everything that that journalist has covered and be like, here's a little bit that they haven't covered yet that they would probably be interested in around this angle. And then also, testing angles before you're wasting the pitch. To be able to say, like, here are all the potential angles I might go with this story. Here's who I want, where I want, test them, be my personal advisor. And it just honestly makes the hook so much sharper, the pitching so much sharper. And really that's the strategy of it, is being able to use it to optimize and test as much as you possibly can. Um, the way I like to think is like having access to a newsroom without like having to stalk anyone or, play bugs off their conference room or something like that. And that is one of the best sort of ways that I've been able to use it, and I've seen it being used internally.
Um, it's interesting because that's very much a time saving thing, but it's more expansive in what it's able to do very, very quickly, because that's the kind of thing we do, right, on a daily basis. We would look at the specifics of what a journalist, I mean, I love how niche the example was that you gave there, relationship journalists in North Wales. But like, yeah, we would do that and try and find that kind of really specific topic or hook or subject line that's going to work for those journalists. But you're right, you can access a lot more information a lot more quickly, and there's still that human decision making, right? So you're still just taking the information, but like processing it and able to get at it quicker rather than those hours and days of research, right?
Absolutely, because so much of the sort of tasks that we do, and you mentioned something that's very important. You said, it's the human element of what we do every day. Some of us have so much experience in an area. You get people coming into a team that are so good at travel, but in an agency setting, you're working with tons of clients. And just because a hook works for a specific publication or for a specific area, sometimes you just need something that broadens your horizons. And prior to AI, maybe we would have been stress testing it and we would have been brainstorming it and we would have spent, 15 minutes in an office asking different people, what do you think about this hook? And what do you think about this hook? And maybe we would have all been in this PR bubble and nobody would have considered, all of these different potential angles that are like available out there. So really having the ability to have all the options in the world, and then you, with your experience, being able to curate that is so helpful in the way that we can do our work.
Yeah, for sure. I mean, what kind of prompts are you using for that? Because I'm fascinated. You share a lot with the team, and I think this is really practical advice for people that are listening. Because one thing that I have experimented a lot with and struggled with initially in the beginning is, I'd ask ChatGPT or Perplexity or something. I'd be like, oh, essentially give me this, right? And then it would come back and it wouldn't quite come back with what I needed. And I
Yeah.
really struggled with it because you're not talking to a person. It's kind of trying to mimic what a person would say. So it's like, how do you, with a person, you could be like, oh, it's not quite what I'm looking for. This, like, how do you do it? How do you go about that?
Um, I think genuinely, and that is such a sort of a thing for me, is always treating it like an intern and assuming that it knows nothing about me, even assuming so much so that it doesn't understand what digital PR is. So giving it every single piece of possible context. And if it does something wrong, being able to say, this is not what I want, or you didn't understand that. My key for any prompt for any task is I always finish with, ask me any questions if you need more information. And 9 times out of 10, ChatGPT, Perplexity, Claude will come back to you and tell you what it needs and the kind of information that it needs from you, that you might have not otherwise thought of. So as much context as possible goes in, and ask me any questions if you need more. And that really, really helps.
That's good. So that's actually something I'm still forgetting, is to ask AI to ask me questions and kind of almost prompt me. But there is a little bit of trial and error with it, which I definitely am understanding more the more I use it. But it still feels quite harsh, right? Because it's the saying of please and thank you that I would do with any human being, and it's like, you failed here. Give me this, give me more, ask me more questions. So, an intriguing landscape for sure. I want to talk a little bit about things that are more feasible with AI, or things that where it still falls short. So let's start with feasibility. What's something you've been able to do with AI that would have been kind of unfeasible to do manually? So something that you like previously was kind of almost out of reach, that AI has really opened doors for you.
I think when it comes to media outreach, the fact is a lot of us have a crutch, right? Where we don't have the time to sit around and think for 3 hours about an angle or something like that. So, so very specific examples. One of the things that we do at Propellernet, and I'm sure other agencies and other PRs do, is asking clients what their dream publications are, right? And they give us a list of publications. Me sitting down prior to even ideation and going through all of these dream publications and pulling out like recurring tones and recurring themes and the headline formats of the past 6 months, that is not feasible, right? But with AI, I have the ability prior to even the outreach to guide me in ideation and to say, this is the dream publication, this is the client, this is the themes that we talk about. What are the tones? What are the themes? In the past 6 months, what do journalists want around this theme? And then use it a little bit as a starting point. It is such a helpful thing. And then in terms of like actual media outreach, one of the very specific examples that I used it for is like mining conversational platforms. So things like Quora, Reddit, things like that. And really understanding audience frustrations that maybe I wasn't clocking because I'm not in that niche. So, like, for example, if we had a gaming client and I was like looking to pitch for very these niche gaming publications talking about GTA 6, yeah, GTA 6.
Yeah, that's good. Yeah.
Do you understand? The point is, I don't even understand the name of the game, much less how it's played, much less what are the audience frustrations around the release of the game. And then using AI to be able to go through all of these audience discussions, pull out what are the key themes, and then go to this niche gaming publication and say, this is our story, and this is what the audience is searching for. This is what your readers want to know. And have that sort of as a backup is so, so helpful. And I would have never been able to do that before unless I knew somebody that knew somebody, or there was somebody on the team that was really into it. But we're always going to find these niche little bubbles that maybe none of the people that we know about. And sort of really being able to surface those like little niche angles that would have been totally off my radar, is one of the most helpful ways that has really been a time saver, but also like a thinking saver, if I will.
Makes sense. That makes sense because you don't know what you don't know. So you work across a range of clients in a range of sectors, and we always start with insights and research, but
Yeah.
AI is kind of helping us to not only save time in doing that, which is kind of, I guess, the most basic and the most understood benefit of it, but it's your reference being a thinking saver. It's kind of, it expands or helps to expand our thinking, right? So it's like, and I've definitely found this where it's like, okay, well, gaming's a really good example. Like, I don't game anymore. I have two small children. I don't have time to do it. I used to love it. But if we're in that world, it's like, I don't know the conversations people are having, and it takes hours and hours to do that. But we're gonna, with the human sort of just doing it as a person, you're gonna miss things, right? So just, it gets us a bit deeper, faster, and yeah, can really speed up our thinking in that area. So that's really, really good to know. Where do you think AI still falls short? with regards to media outreach? What can't it do, or are we in a position already where it can do everything? Don't think we can. What can't it do?
Definitely cannot do everything. I think, we've just talked about a thinking saver, but on the flip side of it, and that is one of the things that it really falls short on, is it can't do the lateral thinking. It's not wired to make these weird creative leaps that we do as digital PRs. Like, I don't know, something strange like connecting, hockey game attendance spikes to Super Bowl Sunday, something weird like that. That's not a next logical word. Connecting this specific sport with this specific sport, connecting this attendance with like connecting travel with like plants being left home alone. It's not something, it's a swerve. It can't do that. Because large language models and AI in general, it's a remix tool. The most it can do is predict. It cannot invent anything new. So you'll always get these safe, predictable stuff unless you, as a digital PR professional, bring in the bold stuff. If you're relying on AI to be original, you're just like getting banned to like that spam folder of shame in 5 seconds. And that ends up being a disservice to your work, and it's a disservice to your clients, and it's a disservice to you as a human being, as a professional, because it just can't do that. It's not wired to do that. So if you are using it for outreach, just consider that you're the one that has the ability to make those leaps. It's never going to make those leaps for you. So use it on the admin stuff, but save your brain power for the juicy creative stuff.
It's a lovely way of putting it. And I would agree. I'm in a creative ideas session this week, which is fairly standard. And yeah, I've got a lot more at my disposal to help that creative, juicy thinking rather than sort of spending ages worrying about, I've got to find all these insights. It's kind of there for me. So that's a lovely way of putting it. I'm going to pivot slightly to talk about trust, because there's a lot of talk about trust in the media, and this was shared quite widely on some of our team Slack channels and around the agency. But how do you see things like AI generated quotes or experts impacting trust in media? Like, this is a really kind of thorny issue, I suppose. And for absolute clarity of people who haven't seen this, there have been reports of people just making up experts using AI that don't actually exist to get expert comment in the press. Like, how do you see that?
I know that there's a lot of different angles from it, and I've definitely seen it firsthand of like even an AI quote slipping through from a client, because if we hadn't done our due diligence, it could have burned us and it could have burned them. And it was very early on in the talks of AI, and we hadn't had those internal policies in place to discuss and to be able to share that. Whether it's that happening and it's an absolute slip through and it wasn't intentional, or we're talking about like fully AI experts being made up, regardless of what we're discussing, it just undermines the brand. It undermines the journalist that maybe doesn't do their due diligence and sort of gets burned in the process. And it undermines our reputation as PRs, right? Tools don't do the due diligence. It's not up to AI to confirm and to make sure that everything is right. We do. It's our job. That's where the line is. So the rise of fake experts and fake quotes is just inbox pollution. It's just noise. It's not really getting you anywhere. And ultimately, we have to think that we're not just pitching a story. When we're talking about anything with an expert comment, we are pitching the trust. And that is not something that you can copy paste. So really, the line is on us. I know that you mentioned the impact that it can have. I think I understand where journalists are coming from, in the sense that they're like, well, now I can't trust expert comments at all, and I can't trust expert quotes at all. You can. We just have to build a relationship where the journalists trust us, trust our team, and trust our client to bring them the best possible outcome. And that is a built-in thing. That is coming from months and years of relationships, and making sure that we're not eroding that trust, and making sure that whatever we're sending out there as PRs, we have done the best that we can possibly do to guarantee that they are getting the best possible comment quote they need.
Yeah. Do you think there's anything else that we need to be mindful of in terms of how AI is changing how journalists view PR outreach and kind of what that means for how we build relationships with them? So in the past, when I started in PR, there was still like, long lunches. Well, not even long lunches. It was getting shorter and shorter. So we'd meet journalists in person, and there's so much time pressure on either side. We don't really do that anymore. But are we kind of thinking that we're going to have other ways to verify our experts and things like that? So it's not just sending across a quick quote with a name. Like, basically, is there anything else that's going to change, do you think?
Oh yeah, absolutely. And I was not around for the luncheon phase because I started in digital PR in the middle of COVID. So I think our luncheons were not possible. But
Don't make me feel so old, Raquel. Don't make me feel so old.
my age and ceiling. Um, what was I getting at? Oh yeah. So, if AI is making everything easier to send, right? Then the journalists are just getting buried in this like noise sphere. And I think we might see that shift back to building actual relationships again, whether that's through DMs, whether that's through comments, whether that's through calls, whether that's through having that back and forth. I've started personally connecting with journalists that have covered multiple of our stories previously on LinkedIn, not to pitch to them there, because that's like, don't do that, but really, but really to just sort of keep a finger on the pulse. And so many journalists now have, there's been an exodus from Twitter and things like that. So really finding where the journalist is being active and is discussing, this is the stories, these are the moves that I'm making, and really keep a finger on the pulse, because then you have the ability to really get those quality, personalized pitches to them. And that's what's going to matter, at least from my view, more than ever. When everyone is starting to sort of shout louder and produce more and more and more, being thoughtful becomes your edge. And that's where I'm seeing that sort of shifting relationships becoming.
Yeah. Makes perfect sense. It kind of comes back to what you said at the beginning of our conversation, using it to become more niche, more specific, greater understanding of the topics covered, and really showing that to journalists rather than just spamming them, which we'd never do. But like, a lot of agencies or professionals would do that because of time and because of the possibility of doing it. And we don't want to erode trust in any way. It's about greater trust, greater transparency. That makes sense, Raquel. I wanted to talk to you. You've mentioned a few names of tools that you use. Are there any other AI tools or features you have found particularly useful for media outreach so far?
Oh, my go-tos are a lot easier because there's a lot of AI tools out there, and they're constantly showing up, and a lot of them promise lots of really shiny things, and I call it AI washing, the same way you would call greenwashing. It's like, it's an AI tool and it can do all these things, and then you go in, it's like, it's the same as it was before, you're just calling it AI to sell it to people. Uh, so the ones that I found like a lot more particularly useful, custom GBTs. So it's specific ChatGPT, little bots that do a very specific task. So, we've got one at Propellernet. It's called Editor Bot. It helps with clarity and it helps with tone and it helps with format. And I use it a lot on press releases, because it does help me understand where maybe I'm being too repetitive or my sentences are too long. Because ultimately in a press release, you just kind of need to get the information across. I found both Perplexity and ChatGPT great for sort of exploring trends and summarizing it and sense checking my angles, when it comes to media outreach. I know BuzzStream created something called List IQ, which is sort of there to help you stop chasing dead email addresses. It's not something I've played around with a lot, but conceptually it makes sense. And coming from BuzzStream, if anybody's gonna have authority on media lists, it's gonna be them. But regardless of the tools that I use or the tools that anybody uses, I'd say that the magic isn't in the tool, it's in the prompt. Learn to ask what you want and iterate on it. And that is going to be the thing that saves you the most. You don't need 10 tools. You just need one that actually does something useful. And that would be my biggest tip for anybody, whether that's in media outreach or any other task of your job.
Great advice. Yeah, it's overwhelming, right? I find it overwhelming the amount of tools there are out there and that are shared and that come into my, LinkedIn or email. It's like, you should use this and, et cetera, et cetera. And you're like, well, I kind of have one or two that really work for me and that I'm still figuring out. But it's a brave new world. There's so much going on. So simplifying, really, really helpful. And that actually leads me on nicely to my next question. And I kind of want you to imagine, or it feels like I'm actually going to be prompting you like fashion AI. I'd like you to imagine. But for people who have or are just getting started in the world of PR, digital PR, what's one or two things they could try this week to get more value out of AI in their PR work? Where did you start? Where would you start?
Okay. Two examples. Let's start with the first one. I'd swap just one Google search for an AI prompt, just one. So for example, I would say, it's, what day is it today? 6th of May, 2025. What travel angles are getting a lot of traction in the UK media this month? It's going to give you such a more specific thing because you've given it all this context. You've said you want travel angles. You've said what day it is. You've said it's UK media. You've said the month that you want it to be in. So that alone, you're immediately going to get feedback that would have otherwise taken you super long with a Google search. And that's just a very simple search that you can make that is going to, pay back tenfold. Or just if you're having an idea session, use it to stress test your idea. Like, give it the idea that you have and then, ask it, what's the weakest spot in this campaign hook? Think like an editor and be brutally honest. And just ask ChatGPT to be an editor. Act like an editor. Be mean if you have to. Just stress test it. And then automatically, again, you're going to get something that you might not get from a colleague or even from a manager that maybe is trying to sort of spare your feelings and sort of guide you in a direction. Because that way you're just getting the best possible outcome that you can get. If anybody's just starting, my biggest tip would be to just really think curiosity beats expertise. You do not have to be an AI nerd. You just have to give it a go. You just have to try and start building your prompt bank is something that I have. It's like every single prompt that I've used and what I've used it for. It saves me so much work, especially in repetitive tasks that I use AI for a lot. If you're not familiar with custom GPTs and if you're not comfortable with building your own bots, just start with a prompt bank, prompts that you've used in the past that were really helpful, and build it from there.
Prompt bank. How do you do that? So like for people that are, say it's ChatGPT, like is there just an easy way? I know this because I have started to do it under your advice, but like for people listening, how do you do it? Is it literally just a really easy, like I've used that prompt? Yeah. Give us a bit more specifics on that.
I have a spreadsheet and it's like, this is the AI tool that I've used it for. This is the exact prompt. And it's just a spreadsheet. And sometimes I might organize it by theme or something like that. And that is my master prompt. Then I have schedule tasks. So if you run a prompt like every single Monday, you go on ChatGPT and you're like, what is the auto news in the past 24 hours? ChatGPT has something called schedule tasks. So right at the top, you can do a drop down and it says, I think it's GPT 4.0 schedule tasks. And you can ask it for every Monday at 6 a.m. to run the same prompt. This is an example, obviously. So that's really helpful.
Makes sense. And I think very, very sound advice. Nice to know there's still the use for a spreadsheet.
I love
So day and age. Yeah, me too. Me too. Final question for you. I'm going to ask you to do a bit of future gazing, which I love to do pretty much of all of our guests. And you can't use AI for this. I might even ask to see your hands to make sure you're not typing. There you go. How do you think AI will change the relationship between PR professionals and journalists over the next, let's say, 3 to 5 years? Let's give that time window.
I feel like we've touched a little bit on that and what it might sort of change when we talked about like expert quotes and comments. But Overall, I do think we're hitting a reset moment. The volume of pitches is going up, but the quality isn't. Journalists are already getting overwhelmed, and that's not even when all of the PRs are using it. So AI could make that so much worse if we're starting to use it lazily. So, the bar for what trust is and the bar for originality is just going to keep getting higher in the next 3 to 5 years. I'm gonna say it's already started. Any PR that sort of treats AI like a shortcut is going to start burning bridges with journalists really, really quickly, even if they don't see it straight away. But those PRs that are using it to sort of like deeply understand what a journalist covers and how they write and what they need, those are the ones that are going to stand out because they're using AI in a strategic way as opposed to a lazy way. I do think we've already seen it, moving away from that sort of mass email outreach and back towards that relationship building sort of relationships. Some of that could be done digitally, like, having personalized intros or sort of reactive pitching through social, or even co-creating content with journalists based on sort of shared data. That is like future pacing. I don't know how that would work, but I do feel like we're already moving towards it. Ultimately, I think being genuinely helpful kind of becomes your unfair advantage. AI, I think, is also pushing us to be better humans in that process because the easy way is just going to be saturated. So that's definitely the way I see things going.
Mhm. So it's using AI as a kind of competitive advantage to enhance what you're already doing well, rather than as a shortcut, which we can see those. I've seen these people online that are like, hey, you could just cut everything out and just do everything like super, super quickly and easily. So write press releases for you, come up with creative ideas and pitch to media like automatically. That's not what it's for. It's an enhancer of what we already do. And I'm with you, Raquel. I don't think the relationship between PRs and journalists will change drastically as long as we are using it in the right way to kind of build trust, to increase the quality still further of what we're already doing, rather than trying to take shortcuts. As ever, it's been an absolute pleasure to chat to you about AI and how it's changing things and what's currently going on. And I'm certain our listeners would have got plenty out of it. Is there anything that I've missed that you've been absolutely dying to say, Raquel, about AI, or is that enough for today?
I think, a final closing thought that I wish everybody to take away from this, just because of how the discourse around AI is sort of heading towards. I don't think, and I don't think anybody that likes AI or that is a proponent for AI and digital PR thinks that AI replaces creativity. It doesn't. It just clears the crap so we can do more of what we do best. It is not a shortcut for you to, do better work. It is a tool that is there to help you have deeper thinking. And when you have this sea of noise, the ability to think clearly is a real flex. Yeah, that's definitely what I want people to take away.
It's lovely. In fact, you've inspired me for future episodes to ask every guest to give us a closing thought, because that was a beautiful summary of some of the things you talked about. Thank you as always for your time, Raquel, and your thoughts. It has been interesting, insightful, enlightening, and just a pleasure to chat to you. So, Raquel, thank you very much.
Thank you for having me.